Well, welcome to the BORDERPOL Journal. Bob will be with us shortly to start the episode for the 14th of May, 2024.
Well,
So,
a happy Tuesday to you.
welcome to my world,
Okay.
which is not real in the background, but
Well, that's the way it goes. What is real and what isn't anymore?
that's what we're here to discuss. The
I think
reality,
so.
the reality of life.
Well, that and as you said, the pre-production, the stupid of the day.
Shall we start with the stupid of the day?
I think so.
Okay.
People may think that what we have behind us is silly, but
Well, the stupid of the day comes from Canada, which is
where
going
else?
to, yeah, okay, which is going to figure out a way to stop car theft. And in the province of Ontario, they are going to suspend some driver's licenses for people found guilty of auto theft offenses. Now, according to the government of Ontario and its politicians, it's going to send a message to car thieves
Mhm.
because car theft is a cowardly and often violent crime that can traumatize victims and communities who experience it, said Mr. Sarkaria, who's the transportation minister of that province. The legislation will propose an escalating scale of license bans for people found guilty by a court of auto theft. If passed, the legislation apply to people convicted of vehicle theft under the criminal code. And the first offenses could see a 10-year driver's license suspension increased to 15 for a second offense and a potential lifetime ban for 3 convictions of auto theft.
Hmm.
Now, these license suspensions would apply to convictions when the court found that aggravating factors were involved in the commission of the offense, such as the use of a weapon, use of force, threat, or pursuit of financial gain. When the suspension will be applied under those criteria, it will be at the discretion of the judge, according to the government. Now, both Canada and Ontario are struggling with growing auto theft in recent years, and they think that you're going to do a real positive kick in the pants to the auto thieves by saying, we're going to take away your license if we catch you stealing cars.
Well, Tom, it just follows along with that whole broad paintbrush approach that we have people who have guns. So if we license them or we take them away, the criminals will follow through with that and they'll register their guns and they'll voluntarily surrender them as well. So now we get the whole thing. We're assuming first and foremost that these car thieves actually have licenses to take away.
I think. 15-year-old steals a car, probably doesn't have a license. But if you think that's stupid to begin with, listen to what this press statement goes on to say. Under the leadership of the Premier Ford, the Ontario government is taking bold action to stop what is a serious and often violent crime. So they will know that when you steal a car in Ontario, there are severe consequences to doing so. The mayor of a city in Ontario called Brampton, which has the highest level of car thefts in the entire country, the mayor, Patrick Brown, called the threat of license suspensions, quote, crucial tool to combat auto theft. Now, I don't know about you, Bob, but this really does make stupid of the week come right to the top, because there's a few more up there, but we're going to talk about more serious issues today. But this is just over the top.
Well, again, it's kind of reminiscent in my mind of what happens when people just don't know what to do. We got to do this because it'll look like we're doing something. Not to pick on our friends to the south, but the right to bear arms. That was put into their constitution when it took you almost 5 minutes to reload after you shot your first gun, right? But
That's right.
now it's a nice concept, but it doesn't keep up with today's modern world. And this whole thing about car thefts, why are people stealing cars? What cars are they stealing? Where do they go? What's the purpose of it? Yeah, surely to goodness, car manufacturers can put things into their cars to, you know, stop them from being stolen. Why aren't we putting the onus back on them to do things like that instead of having it all run by the government? We've talked about it before. The government, well, we'll write a law, we'll enact a piece of legislation, we'll do this, we'll do that, which 9 times out of 10 has to be revised or is found unconstitutional or is found lacking because of something they forgot to look at. So we kind of lost faith in that, and then we'll write another law to fix that. Well, pretty soon we have so many laws that we're not looking at anything. I mean, you go down the street now, no parking, speed limit, do this, do that, there's way too many signs because people have been brought up with the idea that it's the way it is. And we're not thinking logically on what we should be doing or could be doing. Which gets back to the point that I'm trying to make here is we have already an overinflated government at any level here in Canada. When we run out of money, which is coming,
Oh, yes.
what do we want to live without? What can we live without? What is it that, do you want health care? Well, what are you going to give up? Do you want more police? What are you going to give up? And I don't know how we're going to deal with that. Part of it will be dealing, I think, with immigration that we can talk about. Can we afford to bring in 1 million people a year?
I think the focus on stupid kind of sets the tone here, but on a more serious note, this ongoing, now I would say almost a decade long abuse of the immigration and refugee system in this country and in the US as well, and perhaps even to a large extent in the UK, with an open border concept. I got a note this week from one of our followers, you might say, via Twitter, now called X, where the poster puts things into perspective, and I'll just read you what this person wrote, and then some of the reactions. So he starts off by saying, or she, because we're not sure whether it's a he or a she, because they're using a nom de plume, as they say. Picture this: your city, which was 99% white in the 1980s, currently has virtually every minimum wage job establishment filled with only one particular ethnicity that isn't white. They clearly only hire their own, and it couldn't be more blatant. It's clearly an issue because anyone not white or any other ethnicity, and I think I have to underscore that, that isn't from this one group wouldn't be getting a fair shot at these minimum wage jobs once this group is established. And so she asks, what can be done? As the editorial from the BORDERPOL Journal, I wrote back and said that the responses to the post are disturbing. The negative impact of millions of migrants on established communities is clear. Trudeau's ideologically driven policy is revealed. It is an evil concoction that deliberately creates two-way resentment and racism for despicable political purposes. In other words, creating a problem that did not need to exist. But when I looked at the various commentaries that were made, and there are literally hundreds of them, people, this struck a nerve, because I scrolled through some of these things, and it was disturbing, because of course some of the nut jobs come out, as well as those who are really looking at this multidimensionally. But for example, some of the comments where it isn't just ethnicity, it's language as well. My kids are ethnically Indian, but don't speak the Northern Indian languages of Hindi and Punjabi. So they are iced out of these jobs, for example. Another one is that I like to think that they are hard workers and will show up for work the next day, as opposed to, quote, others who may have a hangover. Nothing wrong with working people, regardless of their skin color. At least they're not on the dole and taking care of themselves and their families. Uh, then another one, I was a diversity hire 28 years ago when I worked at McDonald's in Vancouver. It was almost as if corporate forced management to have at least one token white guy. I'm lucky my kids are half breeds. They would have a bitch of a time entering the workforce if they were white. At least the last one is a matter of interest, and how this has impacted, across the country. Quote from a poster was, I did a 4-month RV tour across Canada last summer from Victoria, BC to St. John's, Newfoundland. It was very visible across the country. Small town Saskatchewan, Northern Ontario, clear across Nova Scotia. Felt like I was a minority. And clearly Canadian society is changing. So, and when we talk about Brampton, about the real stupid stuff, in Brampton, this one person is quoting that there isn't a white teenager that can get a job in Brampton unless they have their parents in workplace. In other words, if they don't own the store, you don't work there. All the fast food restaurants are one ethnicity that apparently doesn't even speak English. The quality of service is third world, and Brampton doesn't even represent a Canadian city. So these are pretty tough comments coming from people who clearly are disenchanted with the impact that the couple of million newcomers, as they're like to be called now, have basically gone coast to coast. So it's not just the urban centers anymore that are experiencing the small towns. Some small town in Saskatchewan says, "Well, wow, what happened here?" If resentment could be a quantified and saleable item, Canada would be rich, because an awful lot of people are resenting what is going on, because no one ever asked the established communities, and we're not just talking about white communities here. It's very clear that what we're doing is we're siloing groups in at the government's pleasure into various communities, and this is
I
causing
think so, yeah.
real
And
trouble.
it goes back, I don't want to sound like I'm anti-current government, although some of my colleagues would probably think that would probably be a pretty accurate picture.
Yeah, we'd be shocked
And
and dismayed. There's gambling going on here. Yeah, never mind.
But the divisiveness that we are experiencing now, and in particular with recent events going on the campuses, the rise of anti-Semitism, it's saddening that in less than a decade, we've gone from a country that kind of welcomed people to come in to try their luck, to establish themselves. People were happy to be here, look forward to, it was always a shock when you landed on the ground and you found that the streets actually weren't paved with gold, but at least you had an opportunity to come and try. And now we seem to have, with our current leadership, a divisiveness, a great need to pit you against me, we versus they, them versus us, and it really doesn't matter. Like one comment said, I don't care what color the skin is. I don't care what religion you have. If you're here to do a job, you're here to work, you're here to better the community, great, so be it. But it just seems to me that we've gone so far down a rabbit hole right now that I don't know if we're going to get out of it anytime soon. there seems to be such a divisive
Well,
nature fight.
it's almost as if they've decided that focusing on race and gender is a perfect toxic mix to throw into the hopper that will for political reasons let them stay in power. In other words, if we wreck it, we get to fix it, because I think that's what they're all about. When you look at the whole approach to migration issues, in my lifetime, I've never been asked by the government what I think immigration should be used for, or how it should be used, or who should
Mhm.
be available. Never. And I don't care what government's been in power in my
Sure.
lifetime.
Sure.
Never have they said, well, we might want to ask the people, the communities already here, how they see their place in this program, or in this policy. Never. They've been cowards. They've been gutless, because they know full well that in many cases the answer is not going to be what they want. And there's an elitist bunch that has for 40, 50 years totally destroyed what seemed to be a fairly balanced approach to immigration and the
Mhm.
whole business of accepting refugees. In the case of the former, it was always about, do we need skills for in whatever area, and that's, we're going to open the doors to people or anywhere in the world who have those skills or those things that
Mhm.
contribute. In the case of the latter, they really were refugees, so they were really in fear of their lives for the
Well, for
reasons
the
that.
most part, yeah.
Well,
The-
yeah, okay, but there was a legitimate, in the vast majority of cases, a legitimate reason for, whether it was the Hungarians in '56, the
oh,
Vietnamese in
absolutely.
the
Yeah, there were
'70s,
some very,
or
very
the
good.
night or the Ugandans. I mean, we're old enough that we can start listing, but the stuff that goes on now, where they're subsidizing people to come here, to stay here, where they start messing about with things like, well, we have too many students here, so we're going to reduce the number of students by converting them into permanent residents. Well, that's creative accounting. You didn't change the numbers. You just
Well,
put them in
the only
another
thing it
column.
does, the only thing I think it does, Tom, is that it changes the authority level. So it's no longer a federal problem, it's a provincial or a municipal problem because they're newcomers, they're permanent residents now, and the federal government can wash their hands of them, and it becomes then up to the provinces or the cities, the states to look after these people with welfare or jobs or job training or placements or whatever you want to. But it still goes back to what we've talked about before, regardless of who it is, where they're from, what's going on, the money is coming out of my wallet. I am the taxpayer at all levels. And I don't care what you say or how creative you want to get. When my wallet is empty, it's empty. You can't get blood from a stone.
I know,
So what do you do?
but what is happening? The, in front of our lying eyes, things are happening, and people are commenting. And I never would have thought we'd see the day where folks are visibly upset and will
Mm,
say so. You got comments here that have come into us, like, I'm from a town of under 20,000 near Georgian Bay. There were a handful of East Indian people here till a few years ago. Now every fast food restaurant only has East Indians. He sees this as blatant discrimination. Another one writes that, you ever gone through a Canadian airport security screening lately? Take a look at the demographic of these positions. It's clearly skewed to one group only. Um, or if you go into a Chinese grocery store, for example, there's nobody there but Chinese. So we're not just picking on East Indians here. What we got here is they've deliberately made this thing so silo-like that there's discrimination by virtue of omission. No, we didn't hire any X or Y people in our establishment because we don't want anybody else. So if we're going to start hiring people based on who owns the shop, then we're in deep, deep, deep trouble here in this
Well,
country.
that goes back again. I don't know, when was our charter?
No, that was the father of the current PM who dreamt
Yeah,
that mess up. Frankly, it's
but we
turned
knew
out to
right
be a
away we were in
disaster.
trouble when he
Oh, yeah.
had section 15 that said you can't discriminate. But section 15 2 said it's okay to discriminate when we're looking to increase population X or population Y or affirmative action this or, and that's really what we've gotten into now is, well, it's a charter thing. We're just doing well, and I think wasn't it you at one point had said, well, when will it be enough? Like, if we have 51% female in an overall population of the country, then 51% of all the jobs should be female. Or
Well, you
we,
you know you raise for a very, very dark piece of history when it comes to deciding on what should be the balance between groups based
Mhm.
on race or gender or what have you. The Nazis had a clear vision of that, particularly vis-a-vis the Jews. They didn't want too many Jews in the universities or working in the government because they said, they only make up whatever percentage it was at the time of the German population, so they shouldn't have any more than that percentage of the population in their schools or they're in the government jobs, and you know how that turned out. And now you start messing about, and we've been doing that here. With we started off 40 some years ago because they and you can. This is not to be. The facts are facts. If affirmative action was at the very beginning, particularly in the federal government of Canada, was all about there weren't enough women in the management positions. So a very aggressive program, and you'll remember this, was put into place to hire women. Now,
Mhm.
whether you liked it or not, it had a focus. Yes, you would look around and say, well, we're all this was a male ghetto of managers.
Mhm.
So okay, and the proportion of women in public service was actually higher than the portion of men, simply because a lot of the clerical jobs were back in that day. Women were secretaries, women were typists, when men weren't.
Stenographers, yeah.
Okay, so they took that percentage and said that's how many managers there should be at the top. Well, we're way past that. And now, along the way, of course, many people discovered that a whole lot of unqualified folks are caught up in the tsunami of making sure that that balance was kept. But there was never any talk about, hey, listen, what happens when the target's met? The target didn't matter whether the target was met, overshot, or whatever. Okay, you could never not meet the target, and they never spoke about it. But overshooting was just fine. So now you fast forward to today, and this particular bunch that we have running this ideological nonsense has two things that they focus on: race and gender. Okay, they can't change race very much because if you're born black, white, East Asian, or whatever, you can't change that. But they started messing with gender. Oh well, maybe we can change that. You can see the ideology of this. Okay, so it gets to be insidious. And I was literally very disturbed when I started reading some of these comments, because there were comments that were coming out that I thought were verging on the racist, simply because people are so despondent about how these people run stuff. And if you can't get a job because you don't happen to be the right color for a job, there's something very wrong here. Okay. And when you can't get something done by virtue of a positive policy, but you have to force people to do something, trouble ensues. And part of that reaction is that there is a fear, at least I have one, that you're igniting a racial divide that will only be bridged when there's a reckoning between the two, three, four groups. You know, this setting up of communities based on race and gender, and everything else doesn't count. You see, they could mess with culture, they could mess with language, but they can't. This one is in your face. Okay, you can't not be East Indian. You can't not be white. This is how you're born. Okay,
Mhm.
and so these ideologues with their and you know what's the end game? Someone had, because this I don't understand. Um, like if we're going to play the Nuremberg laws like the Nazis did, then we're going to have to be very careful how we go forward, because there will be serious ramifications between, forget white people, you know, and
Mhm.
this obsession with white supremacy, which just suddenly came out of nowhere with this bunch. Okay, what happens when the East Indians don't get along with the blacks, Afro Canadians, or they don't get along with the Chinese community, which is sizable in this country, right? How is that going to work out? Who's going to be the arbitrator of that
Well,
equality and that diversity and that access to jobs? You know, this is you know, they're messing with a very evil, toxic concoction here, which they don't
very.
seem to have any idea of what the consequences could be.
Well, I think part of that goes back to what I said before, right? We've written laws, and now we're finding out that the laws aren't great, so we'll rewrite other ones, and we create a
So who's we, Bob?
problem.
Who is this we?
Well,
Like, you never
the
asked
royal,
you,
the
they never
royal
asked
we.
me. No, I mean,
Oh,
this is what makes me so frustrated with this bunch. You know, uh, in the pre-production, we're talking about, you know, how democracy works. Well, I don't think democracy is working very well here, because no one's asking folks on the
the
street
tough
what they think.
questions.
The voters still don't have an input on this.
Mhm.
And as I was telling you, there was a fellow who was looking at democracy in the Western world, and he says we're using tools that are 200 years old. You know, the American Constitution was, you know, written 1776. That's a pretty old piece of legislation. That or even the Parliament. You know, Magna Carta. That's pretty old. In those days when you were talking about the Parliament or the Congress, you know, it took weeks for the representative to get to the Congress or to the Parliament, because they had to get on a horse. And but he actually, and very few she's, had to represent the yearnings and the interests of their constituents. So there was no telegraph, there was no internet, there was no radio, there wasn't, you know, there wasn't all this back and forth. So
Well, the instantaneous
there was
connection.
no, that's right. But here we are in 2024, and we're still using this ancient system of democracy, where there's an election in this country, or the parliamentary system, where it's first past the post, and someone with 10% of the vote gets to represent 90% of the people, because might be 15 parties running that split up the vote. This is nonsense. There's no representation there. And similarly in the US. But when it comes down to well, what would be different? This fellow who I was listening to, and on the next broadcast, I'll bring it up on who this chap is, and what his approach is to the changing of democratic machinery. He said Switzerland seems to have the most modern approach and the most direct input by the citizens of the country, because there, if you have a bee in your bonnet about something that needs to be done or not done, you have to collect 100,000 signatures, verifiable signatures of real voting citizens of Switzerland. And if you have the 100,000, you can take it to the parliament, and you can actually have a debate and even a referendum, if it comes to that, on what you think needs to change, or your or so, you know, in 2024, the tools for doing that, they have, and they're using them. Now, you know for sure that the bunch that are sitting in Ottawa, London, Washington, they don't want to change this, because there's my goodness, can you imagine some yahoo telling me what's good for them?
I'm supposed to be telling him what's good for them.
Mhm. Well, and of course, you've heard this statement that they're here to serve the people. Actually, they're here to serve themselves.
Very much so. Yeah.
When you hear them speak, and there's very few, and in fact, I will lump them all together because that's how despondent I am about. They never talk to me. They're always talking above me, as if I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Well, and coupled with that too is that when they do talk, even if it's not to me, it seems that they're trying to talk down to me. Like they know better.
Exactly. It's this ideological elitism that is, I think we're nearing a point where people are starting. Like I said, I saw this reaction to which is plain and simple. In this town where I live, we only have a few of these fast food places. There's no white people working in there. They're all either students or recent immigrants from Southeast Asia. And God bless them, they're working and everything. But this just happened within about a year, literally within a year. So when they're talking about 1.5 million people have come into Canada, they're not fooling. When you get a beach town where I am, where suddenly the people who are working in these low wage entry level jobs, that's just boom. You're lying eyes. All right, it's there. So I don't have a problem with it because they're working. But what I do see is that opportunities for other groups, okay, are going to be diminished arbitrarily, and that won't work. Okay, because human beings don't function like that. I don't care what ethnic group you're from or what color you are. If you think you're being hard done by, you're not going to put up with it for very long. You're going to start finding, and if you weren't a racist before, you might turn into one afterwards. That's and I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
You know? So it's
And I see once again we're fast approaching our cutoff time.
yes, we are. We are. We are. Well, anyway, we started to delve into it, so we'll.
I think so. And again, part of this is going to come down to the fact that change is coming. I hope that it's going to be peaceful, calm. Although looking at what's going on in the world, it doesn't bode well. But
No, no, us, no. I'm afraid I have to, uh, you know, be very unoptimistic. That's not no such word as unoptimistic. What's the opposite of optimistic? Is
pessimistic.
pessimistic. Thank you. I got a brain freeze there for a second. Yeah, I am pessimistic. Yeah, so is my dog. All right. Well, listen, we'll pick this up next week. I think we'll, I noticed that we're getting a lot of interest from our followers on Rumble and on Twitter and Substack. So thank you for that. By the way, if you think you can manage to give us some financial support, even a cup of coffee, as we say, that would be good because we still have to pay for the bandwidth to do this every week. And but there's some costs involved, although we love to do it because we think we're contributing something positive. So with that, I guess you've got to go off do gardening.
I got to go and start my chores now.
Me too. All right, Bob. Till next week. Take care of yourself, and thanks for viewing, folks, and listening. And we'll be back.
Like a bad penny.
Pennies. We don't have pennies anymore.
Oh, gee.
See ya.
Talk to you later.